deaf, lacking the power of hearing, or having impaired hearing.
I'm Chandra Hambrick. I am Briana Johnson's mother.
My name is Terrence, and I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been deaf since I was born.
My name is James Hudson. They name said Boney said, really, my parents found out I'm deaf when I was 3. And when I can hear.
4,000 deaf children are born each year. 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 children in the United States are born with a detectable level of hearing loss in one or both ears.
My name is Briana Johnson. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. At 4 years old, I found out that I was deaf and hard of hearing. I believe that it might have started from birth.
Approximately 15% of American adults, 37.5 million, aged 18 and over, report some trouble hearing.
My name is David. Last name is Dennis. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I've heard different stories about how I became deaf. My family members there, they think I was born deaf, but my mom said that I got sick. I had a high fever when I was 82.
5 out of 6 children experience ear infection, otitis media, by the time they are 3 years old.
When she was born, no one knew that she was deaf. No one in my family is deaf. I had never encountered or experienced personally a deaf person. I've heard about deafness and things like that as growing up for me, but I had never been around a deaf person. She was my first child. No one knew. The doctors didn't tell me nothing. So when I brought her home, I raised her. She was my first. It was a new parent, new mom would normally do. But as she grew older, she was beginning to talk. And she would say things like, Mommy, something's in my ear. She could talk. She could verbalize. She learned Mama, Dada, her aunt's names, her grandfather's name, her grandmother. She did all of that. So I didn't have a clue. So I took her to the doctor. Her pediatrician said they didn't know. They just diagnosed her with an ear infection. So she was put on antibiotics, and I had to buy a certain thing to keep the wax out of her ear and all these different things. She still would say the same thing. Over the course of probably a year and a half, this happened. I took her to every metro Atlanta hospital that I could think of until I heard about a children's hospital called Scottish Rite. So she was 4 years old by this time, and she kept telling me she heard voices in her ear, and I wanted to get to the bottom of that. So I took her to Scottish Rite. They examined her, and I gave them all the paperwork from over a year and a half ago about all this stuff, but the doctors had diagnosed, and this couldn't have been the problem. So the doctor there told me, she's fine, she's healthy, nothing's wrong with her, she's deaf. And they were astonished because she could talk. She could talk on the phone. She was in the school just like anyone else's child. They gave her an audiology exam and determined the extent of her deafness. And there's no way she should be talking and that she should be talking on the phone, because she has what is called sensory neural hearing loss. She's totally deaf in one ear, and the amount of hearing that she has in another ear, she should not legibly comprehend what anybody is saying. They told me I needed to get her in this school, put her in this school, and all this stuff. So I went to visit these different schools, one of them being Coralwood, which is a school for the deaf and the blind. And I went out there to visit, and I thought, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to stunt her, because she's lived the first 4 years of her life communicating with me, and I didn't know. I'm her mother. I just didn't think the learning was for her, so I didn't do it. I kept her in mainstream schools. When she turned 5 to go to regular elementary school, that was when it became a legal fight, a physical fight, a mental fight, an emotional fight for me to deal with kids that was deaf or hard of hearing, because that's when I learned how the prejudices and the unfairness was for these children.
Hearing loss can affect a child's ability to develop speech, language, and social skills. Someone with a mild hearing loss will not be able to hear sounds that are quieter than 25 to 45 decibels. There are 3 degrees of hearing loss: moderate hearing loss, severe hearing loss, profound hearing loss.
I'm profoundly deaf, even though I have a cognitive implant. I got it 4 years ago. But with my hearing aids that I wore both ears, it was hard for me to hear a lot of things. I missed out on a lot. So when I decided to get the cognitive implant, I was trying to enhance my hearing, and I tried to hear it because you can't cure deafness. So when I got the implant, I got more opportunity with God. More people willing to take a risk with me. With my 2 hearing aids, like, it was hard for me to hear people when they talk. I have to reach it, like I'm hearing you. But with my cognitive, if I'm familiar with the voice, I pretty much know what you're saying. Like, I know my mom's voice, my girlfriend's voice, my dad. I'm able to talk on the phone, hear some things, even though I'm still learning. It's like I'm learning how to hear every day, because it's a long process once the complete heal. It takes up to like maybe 5 years to completely heal. And I had this surgery twice. The first one I had was ineffective, so I got another one. I love it. I want to upgrade to a nucleus 7, because right now I have a nucleus 6.
Profoundly deaf, totally deaf, unable to hear anything. Sensory neural hearing loss, SNHL, is a type of hearing loss in which the root cause lies in the inner ear or sensory organ, or the vestibulocochlear nerve.
I'm completely deaf in my right ear, and I'm hard of hearing in my left ear.
I am like 80 to 80%.
See, I wear a hearing aid. I've been wearing it since we found out that I was deaf. During that time, it was a huge struggle for me to even wear it and actually show it, allow people to see it. Back then, it kind of affected my confidence. Like, I was so embarrassed of it. I was scared of it. I didn't want it to be a part of who I am. I used to cover it up with my hair. I remember in school having a flower on my hearing aid to hide it. Just crazy things now that I look back on it. But now in my adult life, it's who I am. It's like a piece of jewelry, you know, and I wear it as if, you know, like it's nothing, you know. But when I take it off, I don't hear anything, you know. I'm just completely deaf.
Over 5% of the world's population suffers from disabling hearing loss. More than 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. 88% of those parents do not know sign language.
When I told Briana at 4 years old that I was going to be that bridge that connected her to this side of the world and to that side of the world, I said I would never learn. And I did that on purpose. And as time went by, I thought, well, maybe I regret that, but I don't.
In 1817, Laurent Clerc and Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet invented American Sign Language. It takes 60 to 90 hours to memorize a book of signs.
Mother and father, you know, sign language. My dad knows some signs. He make up his own signs. I know what he's saying though. But my mother does his signs.
My mom knows more sign language because we are close. But my dad knows just a little bit of sign language.
I did not know signing until 10. I do my best to read a lip all the time. It's really not fair for me, but I have to learn hallway.
In middle school, that was my first time, meeting, other people like me. Seeing that they were there, they were held back. And they were held back really for, I think, to benefit the people that work there, so that they can have a job to continue doing what they were doing. But they didn't care about how it affected the deaf, my deaf friends. They were held back, and I'm like, that's not fair.
For children and youth to thrive in their schools and communities, they need to feel safe and be safe socially, emotionally, and physically.
I remember the stories they would tell me about their families, and it's really sad because their family weren't paying attention to how that affected them growing up. They would say about the TV, they wouldn't put the closed caption on it. To a hearing person, that might seem like, oh, that's nothing. That might seem like something minor. It's fine. You can see what's going on the TV. But that's a huge thing for a deaf person to be able to read what's going on the TV. That's really huge. They would tell me about going to a family outing or just sitting in the living room with their family. Their family just talking, carrying on, and they just by themselves, just sitting by themselves, and they just have to figure out what's being said, but they can't because the conversation is just going on. They're missing everything that's being said, and they would tell me that it would hurt them because they didn't feel a part of the family. That really shocked me because it's like I didn't experience that. If I don't understand something, or if they're talking really fast, or if they're joking around, and if I miss the joke, they'll turn back around and they'll say the joke again, to make sure I know what's being said. It really impacted me, impacted my life, my growth, to just keep pursuing what I'm advocating for, what I stand for.
The most hardest thing with parents that are not deaf is it's hard to communicate, or they misunderstand what you are trying to say, or I misunderstand what they are trying to say. Something I might want to do, they may not understand. But most of the time, I have a bad time with my dad, because we always had bad communication. A lot of misunderstanding because he does not understand sign language. With my mom, almost never, because we're close. She knows a lot of sign language. It's easy to communicate with her.
Sometimes when people talk, people don't realize what they do with their lips. Like they just might not even move their lips. They just might mumble, just whatever. And that's really hard for me to understand.
I'll go to a hearing school with no deaf program until second, third grade. Start going deaf program, not usually sign language. Got you can't really do it hearing all the time. Okay, then we gotta write. The more you get around with them, the more you don't understand sign language.
For me, what I've learned about myself is that I have to get used to a person's voice. So, with my family, I know my mom's voice, I know my brother, I know everybody's voice. But with a stranger, it takes me a minute to be able to understand what they're saying. I'll try to understand their voice, really fast, get used to their voice. At the same time, I'm trying to understand their lips. And then if I don't understand them, I'll just tell them, I'm hard of hearing, I can't understand you. Can you, talk more clearly so I can't understand you? And then the conversation will go smoothly from there.
With me being deaf, I don't let people push me and think that I can't do whatever I want to do. They say, you can't do this because they can't hear, or they can't do this, or they can't do that. But I disagree. I know that I'm deaf, but that can't stop me from doing work. That can't stop me from doing hair. That can't stop me from doing whatever I want to do. Because it's all about what my eyes and hands can do. It's not right that people think that deaf people can't do stuff. I remember one time someone told me that I couldn't do hair because I wouldn't be able to communicate with hearing customers. But I don't believe that because it's so easy to ask a customer what style you want. You can show me a picture or text me. Or no, I can read lips also. So it's different ways that makes it easy for me to communicate with hearing customers. It's never been hard for me since I started doing hair.
I think that everyone should be taught about the deaf and hard of hearing community, the culture itself, from the beginning when a kid starts school. It starts from there. And not only just the deaf and hard of hearing community, but different people that have, other what they call limitations. Like learn about, the blind culture, or learn about people that have different other, limitations, so that people can be more sensitive when they come in contact, with people that have those limitations.
1 in 4 deaf people face job discrimination. Fewer than 40% of those with a hearing disability work full-time.
Deaf people try way harder than we do because their plight is to prove that they can do what you and I can do as hearing people. I had to purchase, 12 or 13 hearing aids because every day she knew she had to put that hearing aid on and go in that classroom. She would go and throw it in the trash can because she was so embarrassed. They picked on her, but the one thing about it that made me encourage her teachers and her teachers to encourage the students was, this is a child that can't hear you, but this is a child that also is maintaining a 3.5, 4.0 grade point average.
I would say my biggest struggle as a deaf and hard of hearing person really is not hearing and acceptance. Being accepted by, people that I came in contact with. Fear and overcoming the fact of accepting my own ability, my own deafness. It took me a while to accept it. And with the support of my family, my mom, she never felt bad for me or, always encouraged me. That allowed me to accept my deafness. But now, as you can see, I've accepted it. I'm living it.
There are only 2 schools for the deaf in Georgia. Since the government defines deafness as a low incidence disability, meaning there aren't a lot of deaf students in one particular area, the government's funding for deaf students is limited.
Back then, there was nothing they were doing to me that was right at that, that couldn't have been done, couldn't have been better. There was money that's being sent to the school for special needs. That's what they call them, children with special needs. That's the department that handles the Office of Disabilities on the state level, that handles children with disabilities that's in these public schools. She was involved in before school, after school, during school, weekend events, because most of the games and things like that is on the weekend. If a deaf child decides they want to go to their high school football game on a Saturday and they don't have a clue what's going on, they just standing there Because remember, they can't hear. And 9 times out of 10, back when she was in school, nobody wants to be a friend to the kids that were with disabilities, which I did not like. You're not disabled. You have ability to do anything. And that's what I taught her. You don't have a disability, but that's the name that they put over these children. So they already give them a mindset when they see the word that I'm disabled, meaning I'm not able. See, when you're able, you're turned in, you're plugged in to the power. But when you're disabled, disable something. Disable your computer. This black screen ain't nothing.
86% of students who are deaf or hard of hearing with IEPs are being educated in mainstream classes. 18.8% of high school students who are deaf or hard of hearing were reading at the 9th grade level or above, while 47.7% were reading at the 4th grade level or below. Individualized Education Program, IEP, requires by law that when deaf students enroll in a mainstream school, they must create an individualized program with their teachers and administrators to meet their needs.
I don't think government that give deaf people good enough that they provide here.
As far as for the Georgia, they need to do more to be involved in the deaf community. I think the North, like DC, New York, Philadelphia, they have more accommodation for deaf people. Deaf people are the best up in the North. If you take a deaf person from the North and you get a deaf person from Georgia, put them together, and you give them a book, you would see like the North tends to have more education than the South. I like, for example, we have a deaf school called Atlanta Early School for the Deaf. Me personally, if I have a deaf child, I would send my kid there because they don't really teach the kids. They can't read because they go to the school to teach the person. If they have a deaf person talking to you, understand communication-wise. But when you're writing, they can't find applications, so it's kind of hard. Like, I met one deaf people who have 3rd grade reading level. So I did not know about deaf culture till I went to high school, and I had these interpreter. I read their lips. I felt like the hand throwing out the word, if that makes sense. So when I got involved with the deaf culture, I felt like a lot of deaf people, a lot of them can't read and write. They passed but then when they out in the real world, they're not prepared. I felt like to be a voice for them because my mother did not play about my education. A lot of hearing parents have deaf students. They don't push them to be better for themselves. You know, I mean, come on, I'm not raised here dumb. Just be involved like my mother was. They have to street smart, but they don't have to book smart. I feel like I have both. So I'm trying to help with that. People like, hey, come on, you know, don't get all mad about it. I'm trying to teach you how to read, be able to communicate, be able to educate, still get better job. Instead of depending on the government paying you Social Security every month.
They want to take those kids and put them in a basement. Most kids with special needs are put in a basement in these schools and nobody ever know they exist. They're not allowed to be cheerleaders. They're not allowed to sing in the choir. They're not allowed to do art class. I mean, just normal things that other kids do. And you're not doing my child that way. As a matter of fact, I don't want you to do anybody's child that way that's in the school that's deaf or hard of hearing. Of course, I had to go through the federal government. I had to go through, it was a lot of different channels and chains to get that broken, where they come in now. They came into that school and actually installed the hearing devices for hard of hearing kids so that the teacher wears a microphone. And you would place the kids that's hard of hearing in one section, and now the kids that are totally deaf, you would equip them with an assistant that could sign so that they don't have to be pushed to the side, because I thought mentally that makes a person feel a certain type of way. Upon me finding out Briana was deaf at 4, I told her I would never feel sorry for her and that she was brave and bright and just as smart, and she could do anything anybody else could do. She had communicated with me, and that's the way we were going to continue to do in our home. Now, I told her that her fight wasn't going to be that simple on her level in her classroom. I couldn't sit there with her 8 hours a day that she's in school, but that's what God, I believe, had equipped her with, to have grown to 4 years old being deaf and no one ever knew. He had already equipped you to handle the struggle that you was going to have, because I know kids already have bullies. They already pick on kids. For every other reason. So definitely when you have to wear a hearing aid and all this stuff, you're going to get picked on.
Deaf children are 5 times as likely to be abused as hearing children. 26% of deaf children are neglected. There are over 5 million deaf individuals in the United States who need mental health treatment every year. Only about 2% of these deaf individuals receive appropriate treatment for mental illnesses due to barriers in the effective diagnosis of mental illness.
I think one of the most scariest moment for me was when going into this classroom and not knowing the people in the classroom. And I remember sitting in front of the class, and I had an interpreter right there. And I still was being bullied, still being picked on. And at this moment, being a new student, remind you, I guess this student was sitting like 2 desks behind me or something. Instead of the interpreter interpreting what was going on, she wasn't letting me know anything. And I remember being hit with like a metal object. It just came flying and it hit me right, like in my hearing aid, like right here. I tell you, the whole class just started laughing at me. I was just put on the spot, and the teacher just kept going with the class, just kept going. I remember when I got home, that's when I started, crying, and I told my mom. And from then on, the next day at school, I felt bad for those people. My mom, they're advocating for me. And that's when I found out what really happened. The girl, I guess she didn't like, black people, and on top of that, I'm deaf. And she hit on me so bad. She was saying things that I didn't even hear. And it went to the point where she hit me with a metal object because she didn't like, black people, and because I was deaf. From that situation, that really taught me how to be aware of my surroundings, to really, really pay attention to what's going on. From then on, I stood up for myself, I wasn't scared anymore, and that's what really brought out, accepting me for who I am.
When I wake up in the morning, I don't want to hear everything at once, because once you turn on, everything is loud. Like you can hear even the water drip, you can hear the AC blowing, the dogs crying because they gotta go. So everything is like amplified. So you have to give me time to tune in. It is the best thing, because I don't want to hear anything, I just turn it off. It's between my one piece to quiet off. I can't even take a nap with my earpiece on, because you hear everything. You hear people walking outside. You hear somebody talking. Me like, damn, I don't think I want to be here anymore. And then, like, I'm driving. I'm at the bus stop. You hear people conversation. I'm like, trying to hear them. I'm like, it's so loud.
Deaf people do not perceive themselves as having lost something and do not think of themselves as handicapped, impaired, or disabled. They celebrate and cherish their culture because it gives them the unique privilege of sharing a common history and language.
What do deaf people do for entertainment? That's another thing. What do deaf people do if they walk into a restaurant? What do deaf people do that we take for granted? We just pull up to a drive-thru. What do they do? What do deaf people do? They want to go to the movies. It's aggravation for people. I notice people that come to my home and you got closed caption going across the screen. It kind of takes some of the picture away. The awareness is not there that I'm accommodating everyone.
When blockbusters open, generally less than 2% of theaters nationwide will offer them open captioned. The 2010 ADA Standards for Accessible Design states, a public accommodation shall take those steps that may be necessary to ensure that no individual with a disability is excluded, denied services, segregated, or otherwise treated differently than other individuals because of the absence of auxiliary aids and services, unless the public accommodation can demonstrate that taking those steps would fundamentally alter the nature of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodation being offered, or would result in an undue burden, significant difficulty, or expense. In 2016, the Department of Justice issued a final rule on the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, as it applies to accommodating disabled patrons in movie theaters. Not providing closed captions and audio description is a violation of the ADA. Have and maintain the equipment necessary to provide closed captioning and audio description at a movie's patron's seat whenever showing a digital movie produced, distributed, or otherwise made available with these features. Provide notice to the public about the availability of these features and ensure that theater staff is available to assist patrons with the equipment before, during, and after the showing of a movie with these features.
Well, I advocate for the deaf and hard of hearing community, bridging both worlds together, the hearing world and the deaf and hard of hearing world together. I stand for showing people that if a person have what the world called a disability, really, when you remove that "dis" out the way, you can really see people's ability. I stand for what's right, being able to just tell people that the judging, the putting down or whatever, it's not necessary, accepting people for who they are. That's what I stand for. And I'm trying to instill that in the world through what I'm doing, through my music, through my fashion, through trying to become an actress. It's so many things that I'm trying to show the world that, hey, I'm deaf and I'm hard of hearing, and this is what I like to do, and I'm hoping that the other people who are in my shoes can see that confidence, and it wears out on them, and it pass on to the next generation and the next generation, and that we can all, take both worlds and put it together and keep, moving forward. So that's what I stand for.
I think it would be easier for hearing people to just learn sign language. That way they would be able to communicate instead of using things to communicate with like pencils, phones, and paper. It would just be easier for them to learn sign language with their hands.
Try to make hearing and deaf get together. One love. Then Haiti, she said it like white and black. Nah, I'm looking for hearing and deaf get together like family.
As the deaf person, I want that person to use their resources the best way they know how and try to keep pushing. Don't give up. To keep pushing. The mic says no, it's okay. Keep it moving. One no. You can stay 1,000 no's before you get to a yes.
Around 466 million people worldwide have disabling hearing loss, and 34 million of these are children. It is estimated that by 2050, over 900 million people will have disabling hearing loss. 60% of childhood hearing loss is due to preventable causes.
My dream is music and art. Get to that goal where I want it. My great-grandfather before death, gospel singer in Georgia. They were 16. My mom full-time taught me the keyboard. About 25, old grandpa started using Fruit Loop Studio. Won't give up in the 4 or 5 years. I started getting better and better and better until start getting on the market, music the best I can, never give it up. Full-time I would draw when I was 8. Draw pretty much a long time through the years. But draw my stuff with the tattoos. Boy, I'm afraid you that can go ahead and do it for it. I like to see a lot more artwork on people's skin.
I found interest in hair. I started when I was 18 years old. And a lot of people have been ordering hair from me, and I feel good about it. And it's deaf people that order from me too. I appreciate that they support me because I am deaf, and they keep pushing me to what I want to be. My hairline is called Forever Extensions. And I want to open a hair salon and a hair store maybe in the next couple of years.
I'm a rap artist, a dancer, fashion designer, and aspiring actress.
I'm a chemist technician. I work in the animal hospital, and I also throw parties on the side for the deaf community. I cater to the deaf community.
It just makes you more sensitive to be compassionate, patient, and nice to people. And even if there's anything wrong, you haven't lost anything by being nice or compassionate or patient with other people. You know, sometimes deaf people aren't aware of their surroundings and just do different little things that you wouldn't normally do because you know a deaf person or maybe a mentally ill person or something like that. But it'll cause you to want to be more patient because we don't know what's going on with people.
Another thing is make it more aware, visualizing. Like if you notice, like on TV, you don't see a deaf person on TV all the time. You don't. You rarely would see a person in a wheelchair on TV, or you rarely see a person that's blind on TV, or in a different industries like music or acting. There's not many. Why? Why is it such like a quiet thing or a shock thing when a person come in contact with a deaf person or a blind person or a midget or whatever? It should be aware or should be exposed to, in the early stages of life. That way when as we're growing, as we're going on in life and you come in contact with those people, it won't be a shock.
I want them to know that they can be anything in this world that they want to be. All they got to do is put their mind and their heart to it, listen to the word of God, learn the word of God, and stand on it, and don't let nobody tell you anything different. Don't receive nothing negative. And if it is negative, look at it, flip it around, and make it work for you.